Well, hi, my name is Elaine Glover, and my maiden name is Merrikin, Elaine Merrikin. My father was Bernard Merrikin. His father was John Thomas Merrikin, who died on the 8th of June 1940 on HMS Acasta after a huge, terrible battle between the Gneisenau and the Scharnhorst, the two wonderful ships, they say, of the uh, is it the Kindesmarine or the whatever from the German Royal Navy, and the HMS aircraft carrier Glorious, HMS Acasta, my grandfather's ship, who was a Stoker First Class, and HMS Ardent, with a convoy with the I remembered it before, can't think of the name, with this other aircraft carrier and HMS Diana, and they're supposed to be in one convoy, but they asked the admiral of this, the leading, the leading aircraft carrier, if they could go somewhere, and I don't know, I don't quite know. Apparently, they were going to court-martial um, somebody for not taking orders because he wouldn't let the aircraft go to where he was told to go because this, that, and the other. And I think it was because they were going to be used to stop the German Navy from getting iron ore from Luleå in Sweden because they use the iron ore for armament. And I don't quite know what happened, but there was a big controversy because 1,531 men died, including Grandad lost at sea, HMS Glorious Captain Guy Doyley Hughes, the two commanders on the Ardent and the Acasta, they all died, and only a few survived. So there was a big hoo-ha. But until this time, I had no idea the family that I came from until COVID. I knew certain things that Grandad came from Lincoln, but I didn't know the extent of the family. And it was amazing because when I began to research, I put up the Merrikins on one of these um, ge genealogy sites, and all of a sudden, I'm going to read it really. I discovered that I was from a huge family that went back to before the 1500s. There was Hugh Merrikin, who died in 1601. Wilmus Merrikin was born 1850 and died 1635. He was born in Thedlethorpe. And then, let me just do it on a slower thing. It's going a bit too fast here. So there was Hugh Wilmus, then there was Christopher Merrikin. And I'm not sure if Christopher Merrikin and Francis Grime, who were born in 1610, were the parents of John Merrikin Sr., who went to Maryland. I'm not sure. I know they had a son called John, but it may not be the John that I'm thinking of. Then we had William Merrikin in 1639, born in Thedlethorpe. Then William born in, I don't quite know when, about 1675, born in Thedlethorpe. Then we had Edward Merrikin, who was born in Carlton Castle. Then we had, trying to go back to where we were here. William again, born in Gayton-le-Marsh. Then Samuel Merrikin, born in Marsh Chapel. He was born in 1771. And Samuel was a very wonderful farmer. He knew what to do with the money because he owned most of Lincoln in England. And when he died, he left his farm in between four sons who squandered all the money, which is normally the case, isn't it? Then we have Matthew Merrikin, born 1803. John Merrikin, born 1847. He was married to Anne Green. She died, and then he was married to Mary Sanderson. And they were my great great grandparents, who had John Thomas Merrikin in 1902 to 1940 after he'd been killed at sea at World War II. And they had my father Bernard. However, my dad died when I was 11 in 1973. His elder brother, Alan, was born um, a bit earlier than that, but he died in his 20s of TB. And then we had Norman, who was, I think he was the middle brother, I'm not quite sure, but he died in the 1980s of cancer. And they had a daughter called Catherine who died at birth or a few months later. I'm not sure quite what happened to her. Um, Now, my grandfather's either cousin or uncle was called George Holden Merrikin, and his father was George, and George was an auctioneer. Now, funny enough, when I was younger, I was an antique dealer and went to auctions. But Canon George Holden Merrikin was born in Louth, I do believe. And well, I just believe he became a Christian like me. I'm a Christian, I'm a born again Christian, but I'm also Jewish. And he was a precentor at Bristol Cathedral. He was also went to learn about theology in Ely and Cambridge, and was a teacher. Try and find my drink somewhere. And he was a teacher, I'm not sure, somewhere down that way, a sports teacher. Um, but then in World War One, they called him up and he was a stretcher bearer. I'm not sure whether the stretcher bearer first or last, but I know that he was a second lieutenant in the London Fusiliers and also a stretcher bearer. He didn't want to be a part of war, but unfortunately he had to do what he was told. He was a very brave man. He was in Crossy or Crossel in France in World War One in 1918. And he was in no man's land and he was saving several men and he was trying to go for another guy, but sadly he was shot in the heart. And he has got the Victoria Cross and many medals and he's buried in France. We also have a John Merrikin and he just having a look here, I wrote about him. He was on HMS Bullock, exploded on the November the 26th in 1914 in the River Medway near Sheerness, whilst taking on ammunition, and resulting in a massive loss of life, 741 men, an internal explosion that killed both officers and ordinary seamen. He was terribly sad, really. I know I can't remember his mother, but he came from Hull. And apparently it was caused by overheating in the cordite charges near the boiler room. And so it was awful. Terrible. So both John Merrikin in the First World War and John Thomas Merrikin in the Second World War were involved in these terribly awful naval disasters. I'm sure there was, who was the other one? I think he was called Frederick Merrikin, and he was a prisoner of war in Japan. Could have been the railways, I'm not sure, but he died. That was terrible as well, very tragic. Um, but going back to John Merrikin, he was born in he came from Stepney in London. And this is where the Grenfell Towers are now, where they had that terrible fire and many, many people died. But it was around there. He was from Ratcliffe. He emigrated from Ratcliffe. I just got this bit more information. And he came to Maryland in 1659 with his wife. Now, these three questions. One, who was John Merrikin's mother and father? Because if I found that, I can lick up the whole family. That one question means so much to me. And can I find out? No, there's nobody. I mean, I have said to look at the Baptist thing, but I don't know where he was born. I need to know where John was born and who his mother and father were. Then I can find out um, what happened because I just don't know. I don't know who his parents were. Was his wife called Sanna Bose? Because on his marriage documentation, it was Sanna Bose. Another documentary, it was Christian Merrikin. Were they the same person or were they two people? And also, what boat did they go on? Can I find out what boat now? I've been on Ancestry, doesn't give you the name. You can have researchers on Ancestry costing you thousands of pounds, but no, there must be somebody somewhere who knows who his father is. So if you know, please email me on Elaine Waterfield.
Someone's at the front door doorbell.
So anyway, that's what I'd like to find out, who John's parents were and what was the name of his wife, because I'm a bit confused. Is it Sanna Bose? Is it Christian Merrikin? Or is it Sanna Christian Merrikin? I don't know. And as I said, I'd love to have the name of the ship. I'm trying to do some research, but it's very hard. Nobody seems to know, but we'll get there in the end. So if you have any information or would like to write to me about your family, whether it's Chip, Pettibone, or Bob, or whoever, I'd love to find out more information and also any old photographs because it just makes it so interesting to see one of these old Merrikins. I've got some pictures from George Twerk Merrikin, whose relative goes right back to John. And I've got some of his great grandparents and his grandparents, and obviously of himself, which is quite interesting. Um, but yes, so I've been really looking into the Merrikin family and seeing that when they arrived, they began to buy land because obviously you've got to live somehow. And I'd imagine that's what they went to do. They wanted to have plantations, and obviously it would be tobacco. So I found out that they had Merrikin's Point, they had Merrikin, they had Scotland, they had various bits and pieces of land, which I've written in my book, and also Merrikin Creek, which was made uh, Meredith Creek in 1824 when map readers spelt the name wrongly and we had Meredith Creek when it should be Merrikin Creek. It was really important that we need to get this back to Merrikin Creek. I don't know whether we can sign a petition or what we can do, but I want to write to somebody somewhere and say, look, it's not the Meredith Creek, it's Merrikin Creek. It's our heritage. It was called that because of our ancestors. So that's one of my targets anyway. Um, also they had 15 slaves, or probably a lot more than that over the years. Some became free after William Wilberforce got passed through the British Parliament that they should be no more slaves, they should be free. They also had not just black slaves, but white slaves, because when they were at war, whoever they captured, they made slaves. I didn't know whether they have to be there for so long and they'd have to buy their freedom or what happened. I'm looking into slavery, and if there are anybody watching who were Americans from the slaves that were there, because I know that's what happened, and I think it's Anne Merrikin, and when her husband died, she married a slave who seemed to be quite a nice guy, from what I've read in some of the bits of information that I've got. When I first found out that the Americans had slaves in their, when the Americans had slaves in their homesteads and farms and plantations. I was horrified. Slaves? Oh no, slaves! But the thing is, that's what happened in those days, and you can't condemn them. I know if they were cruel to them, well, that's another matter, but I don't know enough about it. And when I've tried to find people that I've seen saying, oh, John Merrikin had slaves, and I'm saying, well, actually, I am an ancestor of them. Can you explain? They don't bother to come back to you or talk to you. I've also come across the Merrikins, Merikins. They're a group of people that came from the old slaves back in the day, and after they had the independence and after um, the Wilberforce, I like Wilberforce, he was a great man, as certain others. Um, but they moved to the Caribbean. And I am sure they're related to the Americans because American's a funny name. And the way they spell it, I wouldn't be surprised if some of them were influenced by the American family or the American slaves. But when you ask them, they don't answer you. They don't want to talk about it. So that's why I'm calling out to all Americans to send me stories, very old bits of information, anything. And I know that the Americans had a gold seal. They would sign things with it in those days, but I don't know what happened to it. And all the Americans, whether you're called Pettibone or Stitchcombe or Duval or whatever, you're all important. We're all a family and we all need to stick up for each other and tell them a story about the pioneers. I've written a book or writing a book at the moment, putting as much information in there as possible. Um, to make the story come alive. But the biggest thing is missing. I've got some old pictures of George Twerk Merrikin, who was an ex-film director in the early 30s, and he was in the Second World War. Somebody who was a pilot taking film of um, what was happening in the skies, looking down below at actually what had happened and where people had bombed and various things like that. So yes, it's all very interesting, but I need your stories. I need your photographs because this book is about a genealogical thing to help people search, research, find more things out, come to see who the Americans were because I'm really proud of them actually, and the Pettibones and all of them because it would have been a terrible place to go to originally. I've been to Kenya as a missionary in the middle of nowhere, and I had to live in a mud hut and a mud brick house and live I had to wash in filthy water and we had to boil the water and we had little tiny sun-dried fish which were horrible called a manna and boiled cabbage or fried cabbage, very little meat, corn, garlic, high high protein, high protein food, and whatever. So yes, it's been very interesting indeed, and um, I'm just going to look now at some of the information that I've written. Won't be a moment. And for me, I think, when you see the amount of land, Woodham, Young Richard, Bailey's Content, Leonard's Neck, Scotland, as I say, and Betty's Point. But that really got on my nerves about the Merrikin Creek being called Meredith because, as I say, it's our heritage. I'm just going to try and go down here to the names of some of the slaves because I do think it's very, I can't really find it, unfortunately. I won't be a moment. I just wanted to share some of the names of the slaves. One of them was called Negro, and I think that's terrible. I remember when I was in Kenya as a missionary, one of the people were called um, Wog, and that's what white people in England used to call, they won't be calling them today, would call they call them niggers and wogs. And somebody had called this to a Kenyan man, and he said, "My name's Wog," and I thought, "Oh dear." And I didn't, you don't know what to say, do you? Because what you used to be able to, now these slaves, one was called Sakos, Johnny Boy, Toby, Robin, Will, Tony, Peter, Mingo, Samson, Jacob, Simon, Blankum, Foot Blankum, I don't know what that was about. Eleanor, Hugh, Thomas Seaborn, Edward Carter, John Boyd, and John Larkin. Some of these were called per bond. So I know that, as I say, some of the slaves would have been from when they'd done wars or battles or whatever, and they would have to. I don't know whether they were a slave for a certain amount or whether they had to work themselves until the slavery had finished. I really haven't got a clue. I mean, this was notes. Where is it? It keeps. The slave owner, Johnny Berry, was born in Montgomery County, MD, served as captain during the War of 1812 and as a colonel in the state militia, and owned a bricking business in western Baltimore near Franklintown Road. Somewhat unusually, many of these deeds are for enslaved people with delayed manumissions already in place. So the deeds are the remaining term of the service covering a fixed period. They include receipt of Barry's purchase of will from Joseph Blake, 1812, with a note by Barry adding, "I wish to set Jack free." So this is quite interesting, actually. Um, I don't know. Some of them talk about the Merrikins, but you just tend to be going up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down on your thing. You don't seem to get anywhere. But yes, um, I want to look into as well. I don't know whether any of you know if you could send me emails about what the conditions were at that time, because I know, like when I lived in Kenya, I had malaria numerous times and typhoid and the jiggers, and came home and have cerebral malaria and nearly died, and now I've got brain injury. So I can imagine that that's the kind of thing that the Americans would have had to deal with, like smallpox, malaria, all those things, because it would have been quite terrible. Because their immune system, like what happened to me, my immune system had never had malaria before. So when I had it, I was very sick. Uh, and I'd like to know about the American Indians as well. I probably have already mentioned this. How would they have treated them? Did they kill them? Did they kill the pioneers? Did they talk to them and barter with them? I don't know. What was the food like that they had at the time? If you could share with me all those things that you know, that would be absolutely wonderful, because I'm really interested, especially with the American Indians. And I know that some of them went because they were Catholic, some of them were Puritans, some of them weren't. So in Maryland, were they Catholic or Protestant or both? Were they? I know that a number of the Merrikin family, like Joseph and Richard, were what they call members of the cloth. They were vicars of, I'm trying to think which, the Methodist Church, and it was at a, not sure if I don't know whether you know the song, because I watched a film about this act that was passed through. It took a lot of time. John Wilberforce. And is it John Newton, the one who wrote Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me? I didn't know that he was on a ship that took the slaves to different countries. He was involved with slavery, and when he came to Christ as Lord and Savior, the Lord really obviously spoke to him about slavery, and he had to turn away from it. Is it Isaac Newton? Yeah. No, John Newton. It was John Newton, and also, what was it? I put it on the floor somewhere. William, no, William Wilberforce, yes. And it really opened my eyes now about Amazing Grace. That was his song from his heart because he really didn't like the thought of being, into slavery, and that was a problem. And I know that Hugh, going back to John Senior, Hugh went back because he was sick. He went to Stepney, he went to London, and he passed away. John passed away very early. He only was about in his 30s when he died. They died very young at the beginning. And I know there was a number of Merrikins who were captains in the militia. And I don't know a lot about their history, their military history. So if you do, please let me know. And I'm going to keep looking for photographs. That's why I'm not going to tell you everything because I want you to read the book about the Merrikins. I've got a lot of information, but I really want John's mother and father. Who were they? Because there's no mention of them anywhere. And if I could find it, I could just fit this family together. But anyway, um, I've been shuffling around a bit because I've had a settee delivered, and it's off and on recording. But yes, please contact me, Elaine Glover, at elainewaterfield53@gmail.com. And my number is +44 75868 53985 on WhatsApp. And we could even have a little chat for free on WhatsApp if you actually get it. And I'd love to see you, Chip, and I'd love to see Bob and all the others who are involved with the Merrikin family. So many people know little tiny bits, but if you all get the information and put it together, we can help each other. I'm not doing this for me. Like with the book that I did about Grandad, The Mystery of Operation Alphabet. It's a big book, but this will be a big book, I think. I really wanted to get published, not for me, but for people to understand and get to know what happened. And they sold all this different land and, what's happened to it now. And are there any cemeteries of the late Americans? Because I know they put a cross years ago. I don't know what's happened to that. And I do want to come to America. I think that's the best thing for me to do, really, to experience and see it. And obviously, it won't be the same as when John Merrikin went there, but they were so brave and courageous. But it did say that it was Christian Merrikin who took them to Maryland. It wasn't John, but it was. But I know that Santa Bose's mother was a lady. But then again, the Bose is the name of one of our royal family were Bose Lion. So I don't quite know. I just wish I could get access to some of this ancestry, but it's a blooming nightmare. So anyway, please keep in touch with me and I'll do another one as I find more and more bits and pieces. This is just to say hello, really. If you're up to a Zoom, we could do a Zoom, couldn't we, with all the different people talking about it? I think it'd be a good idea. Anyway, God bless you and a happy new year. And I do pray that I can get this book finished, put out so that you'll have an idea